The wise men made a pilgrimage from the east to worship at the cradle of Christ, and the shepherds journeyed from field to town in search of Jesus.
Nobody saw this coming. Not the courtiers, not the senior advisors, not even the people closest to the throne. And yet here we are. King Charles has just made one of the most quietly seismic decisions of his entire reign, and the ripple effects are going to reshape the British monarchy in ways that almost nobody is talking about yet. Lady Louise Windsor, the young woman who just a few years ago was a teenager, barely known outside royal enthusiast circles, has just been handed a role so significant, so loaded with constitutional weight, that senior royals are apparently stunned into silence. And the question you need to be asking right now isn't just why Louise, it's why now? And more importantly, what does this tell us about the state of the monarchy, the health of the king, and who Charles actually trusts when everything is on the line? Because this isn't ceremony. This isn't a title handed out at a garden party. This is King Charles making a statement about the future of the House of Windsor. And the implications are enormous. Stay with me, because this is going to take you somewhere you did not expect. The context nobody is giving you. To understand why this appointment has left the royal family speechless, you first need to understand the pressure that the monarchy is operating under right now. King Charles is dealing with his own health situation. That is not a secret. He has been remarkably transparent about it, far more transparent than any previous British monarch would have dreamed of being. And that openness has actually earned him a kind of public goodwill that his predecessors might have envied. But transparency about a health battle and actually governing a kingdom while fighting one are two very different things. The machinery of the British state doesn't pause because the person at the top of it is going through treatment. Documents still need to be reviewed. Intelligence briefings still need to be received. State papers still need signatures. So who steps in? This is the question that has been quietly tearing at the fabric of palace decision-making for months now. And the answer has never been as simple as the headlines have suggested. The obvious answer, the answer that anyone who's watched The Crown once would give you, is Prince William. He's the heir. He's the future king. Surely he's the logical choice to absorb some of the administrative weight while his father recovers. But here's what people keep missing. William cannot do it right now. Not fully, not without cost. Think about what William's life actually looks like at this moment. Catherine is still navigating her own serious recovery. Their three children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, need a present, engaged, stable father. William is carrying the psychological weight of knowing he will one day inherit the crown, and that weight is significant even in normal times. To force him to also absorb the day-to-day mechanics of governance while managing all of that would, in the words of people close to the family, simply be too much for any human being to carry. And Charles knows this. He loves his son. He is not going to break him. So Charles looked elsewhere. And what he found, or rather, who he found, has sent shockwaves through every corner of the palace. He looked at Lady Louise Windsor. And if your first reaction to that name is surprise, then you are exactly where Charles wants the world to be, because that surprise is precisely the point. Who is Lady Louise Windsor? Really? Let's talk about Louise, because the portrait that most people carry of her is dangerously incomplete. Lady Louise Windsor is the daughter of Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, and Sophie, now the Duchess of Edinburgh, a woman who has quietly become one of the most respected figures in the entire royal household. Louise was born in 2003 with a condition called esotropia, which caused complications during her birth and required significant medical intervention. She grew up largely outside the relentless glare of the royal press machine, and that was a deliberate parental choice. Edward and Sophie made the conscious decision to give their children as normal a life as possible, to shield them from the performative demands of public royal life until they were old enough to choose it for themselves. And here is what makes that decision so significant now. Louise chose it. She didn't have it thrust upon her. She didn't fall into royal public life because there was no other option. When she came of age, and the decision was made about whether she would take a working royal role or step back into private life, she and her parents engaged in genuine deliberation. And she emerged from that deliberation with a clarity of purpose that very few people at her age in any family, royal or otherwise, managed to find. She is, by every account from people who have worked with her, intellectually serious. She read English at the University of St. Andrews, the same university where William and Catherine famously met, and she has not used her royal position to coast through it. She earned her place there. And she has brought that same seriousness of purpose to every royal engagement she has taken on. But here is the thing that really matters. Here is the quality that Charles is betting on above everything else. Lady Louise Windsor has absolutely no dynastic ambition. Now think about what that means in the context of royal politics, where everyone is always measuring, calculating, positioning, where every move is analyzed for what it might mean 6 steps down the line. Louise is not playing that game. She has never played that game. She cannot become queen. She has no faction behind her. She has no interest in accumulating power or influence for herself. Does that remind you of anyone? It should. Because it is almost exactly the quality that made Princess Anne the perfect person to hold expanded administrative authority when Charles needed someone he could trust with the actual mechanics of governance. Anne has no path to the throne, no incentive to manipulate the system, and therefore everyone from the Prime Minister to the public trusts her completely. Louise is the next generation of that, and Charles, who has been watching his niece develop with quiet attention for years, has apparently decided that the time has come to bring her into the institutional machinery in a way that will define her role for decades. The decision that changed everything. Here is where the story gets genuinely dramatic, because the appointment of Louise to this Regent-adjacent role didn't happen in isolation. It is the result of a chain of decisions stretching back years, and when you trace that chain, you start to see that this was never going to be a surprise to the people who were paying attention. Start with Edward and Sophie. If you want to understand why Louise has been positioned the way she has, you need to understand what her parents have spent the last decade building. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, has arguably become the most strategically valuable working royal of her generation. She has worked tirelessly on causes ranging from preventing violence in conflict zones to championing care for people with visual impairments, causes that require genuine engagement, not just ribbon cutting. She has traveled to some of the most unstable and challenging environments in the world to do this work. She is not doing it for the cameras. There are often no cameras. She just shows up and does the work. Edward, for his part, has shed the slightly awkward public image that followed him for years and emerged as a quietly indispensable figure in the Commonwealth network, the same network that his father Prince Philip spent decades building and his mother Queen Elizabeth spent decades cultivating. He understands the historical and diplomatic weight of that network in a way that very few people outside the family do. So Louise grew up watching both her parents operate in that way, with purpose, without ego, with a complete understanding that the work mattered more than the recognition. That is not a small thing to inherit from your upbringing. Now add to that the decision that Queen Elizabeth made before she died, and this is crucial, so stay with me. In late 2022, Elizabeth orchestrated an amendment to the Regency Acts through Parliament. She added Anne and Edward to the list of working councillors of state for their lifetimes. On the surface, that sounds like a bureaucratic technicality, but it was anything but. It was Elizabeth solving a problem that nobody was talking about publicly. The fact that the old list of people who could step in and exercise the monarch's powers had been effectively compromised. Harry had removed himself from royal life by moving to California. Andrew had been rendered politically unusable by his own catastrophic scandals. Elizabeth looked at that situation and acted. She fixed it. She locked Anne and Edward into the system permanently, in a way that was legally airtight and politically impossible to argue with. She was, in essence, laying the groundwork for exactly what is happening now, ensuring that when Charles needed someone to lean on, the constitutional machinery was already in place. And by putting Edward on that list permanently, Elizabeth also made Louise's elevation possible. Because Louise is Edward's daughter. She is already inside the circle of trust that Elizabeth drew around the institution. She was already being prepared, even if nobody used that word out loud. So when Charles made the decision to appoint Louise to this role, he wasn't making a random choice. He was completing a plan that began with his mother, that ran through his sister Anne's expanded responsibilities, and that now arrives at the next generation, at a young woman who is, in many ways, exactly what the monarchy needs right now. What this means for Camilla. Now we need to talk about the tension. Because there is tension here, and it is real, and it runs deep. Camilla is the queen consort. She sits next to Charles at state occasions. She carries the title. She is, by every formal measure, one of the most powerful women in Britain. And yet, she does not get the red box. She does not receive classified intelligence briefings. She does not sign legislation or exercise constitutional authority. When the actual machinery of governance is moving, Camilla is essentially watching from the side. That is not an accident. It is not an oversight. It is a deliberate statement made by Charles himself about who he trusts with real power versus who occupies ceremonial space beside him. And now, with Louise being elevated into this regent-adjacent role, the gap between Camilla's title and her actual influence has widened even further. Because what Charles is doing, whether he has said it in these terms or not, is building a circle of governance around himself made up of people he completely trusts. Anne is in that circle. Edward is in that circle. And now Louise is being welcomed into it. Camilla is not. Think about what it must feel like to be the queen consort, to have fought so hard and for so long to reach a position that the public initially resisted her occupying, to have finally arrived at the title, and then to watch as your husband's family quietly arranges the actual levers of power in ways that exclude you entirely. There is something deeply poignant about that, regardless of how you feel about Camilla personally or about the history that led to her position. She is married to the king. She is his daily companion. And she is being shut out from the things that matter most. The shadow of Diana hangs over all of this, as it has always hung over Camilla's position. The British public never fully forgave her for the role they perceived her playing in the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage. And even now, decades later, that weight persists. It means that when Camilla watches Anne and Louise being celebrated and elevated, it is happening against a backdrop of public sentiment that has never fully been on her side. Does this cause tension within the family? That is the question you should be asking. And the honest answer is, how could it not? William and Catherine's role in all of this. Now, here is something that has gotten almost no coverage in the mainstream royal commentary, and it matters enormously. William and Catherine are not just passively watching Louise's elevation, they are actively supporting it. And that support is not incidental. It is strategic, it is deliberate, and it reveals something important about how William is thinking about his own path to the throne. William has, by all accounts from people close to both households, been vocal within the family about respecting and supporting Louise's new role. He understands something that outsiders often miss, that having Louise occupy this regent-adjacent position actually helps him. It takes pressure off him at a moment when he cannot afford to be everywhere doing everything. Catherine is still in recovery. His children need him present as a father. The emotional and logistical demands on him are already enormous. If Louise can carry some of the administrative weight, the briefings, the ceremonial constitutional functions, the things that require someone trusted to physically show up and represent the institution, then William gets to be what he needs to be right now, which is a husband, a father, and a future king in preparation, not a present king in practice. That is an incredibly intelligent power distribution. And William, who has spent years watching his grandmother operate and who has absorbed far more of the institutional wisdom of the monarchy than people give him credit for, gets it completely. Catherine, too, has made her respect for this decision clear in the quiet ways that the Waleses tend to communicate these things, through gestures, through proximity, through the deliberate way they have positioned themselves at public events in relation to Louise and her parents. You will not find a quoted statement from Catherine on this subject. You will find something more telling. Body language, allocation of attention, and the consistent message that she and William view the Edinburgh family as allies, not rivals. And that matters. Because in the history of the British royal family, the relationship between the Wales household and the Edinburgh household has not always been easy. There have been tensions, rivalries, misunderstandings. The fact that William and Catherine are actively aligned with Louise's elevation is not a small thing. It is a statement about a family that is, for perhaps the first time in years, moving in the same direction. The historical precedent. Let's pull the lens back further, because the history here is actually extraordinary. What Charles is doing with Louise is not unprecedented, but it is rare. The appointment of a young, relatively unknown royal to a position of genuine constitutional significance typically happens either in moments of crisis or in moments of visionary leadership. And what makes this moment so interesting is that it appears to be both simultaneously. The crisis element is obvious: the king's health, William's current unavailability, the need for someone trustworthy to step into administrative functions without creating a political firestorm. Crisis leadership is reactive, and there is certainly a reactive element to this decision. But the visionary element is what will define Charles's legacy here, if he gets it right. Because by choosing Louise, someone young, serious, unburdened by decades of royal baggage, untouched by scandal, and genuinely committed to service, Charles is making a bet on the future. He is saying that the monarchy's survival in the 21st century depends not on the people who have always been at the center of things, but on the next generation who are willing to do the actual work without needing the spotlight. Think about what Queen Elizabeth did for Anne. She spent decades essentially training her daughter for exactly this role. She sent Anne to the places where real diplomatic work needed to be done. She trusted her with genuine autonomy when the situation demanded it. She did not do this by announcing it or making grand public statements. She did it through assignment, through trust, through the slow accumulation of meaningful responsibility. And then, right before she died, she locked it in legally through Parliament. Charles appears to be following the same playbook with Louise, but at an accelerated pace and with a greater degree of public acknowledgement. He is not waiting decades to make it official. He is doing it now, while he still can, while he can guide it, while he can ensure that Louise has the support and the framework she needs to actually succeed in the role. That is not a desperate move. That is strategic leadership, and the fact that it has caught so many senior royals off guard, the fact that it has left people speechless, suggests that Charles understood something about this situation that the people around him did not, what the public actually thinks. Now, because this is ultimately about an institution that exists in relationship with the public it serves, we need to talk about how ordinary people are responding to this. And the response, overwhelmingly, has been one of cautious but genuine optimism. Louise has not had enough public exposure for people to have strong opinions about her in the way they have strong opinions about William or Catherine or, especially, Harry and Meghan. She is, in a sense, a blank slate. But a blank slate with extraordinarily promising brushstrokes already in place. People know that she chose St. Andrews. People know that she and her brother James made the deliberate, much commented upon decision to decline the prince and princess titles that they were entitled to, choosing instead to be Lady Louise and Viscount Severn, a choice that read, to many observers, as a statement of values. They were not interested in the trappings, they were interested in the substance. And in an era where the monarchy's greatest existential threat is the perception that it exists purely for spectacle, that kind of quiet rejection of empty prestige is more powerful than any PR campaign the palace could ever design. Think about what that decision actually cost them. Titles carry weight in Britain. They open doors, command rooms, shift treatment in ways both obvious and invisible. Louise and James looked at those titles and said, "No, thank you." That tells you something fundamental about what they were raised to value. And people know, those who follow royal affairs closely, that when she has appeared in public at royal events, she has carried herself with a gravity and a composure that belies her age. She is not performing royalty. She appears to be inhabiting it in the same way that the late Queen Elizabeth inhabited it, as a duty, as a responsibility, as something that requires everything you have. The comparison to Anne is inevitable and, in many ways, apt. Anne ranks consistently at the very top of royal popularity surveys, right alongside Catherine and the enduring memory of Elizabeth, precisely because the public sees her as someone who shows up and does the work without needing validation or media oxygen. She is trusted because she is trustworthy. She is popular because she has earned it. Louise, young as she is already drawing similar comparisons, and the public response to her appointment has reflected that, not wild enthusiasm, but the quiet, solid approval that in Britain often means more than any amount of enthusiastic press coverage. It is the kind of approval that lasts, the kind that builds over decades into genuine institutional trust. And right now, that is exactly what the monarchy needs more than anything else. The questions that remain. But let's not wrap this up too neatly, because there are real questions here that deserve to be asked. Is Louise ready for this? She is young. She is serious and capable, yes, but the weight of what is being placed on her shoulders is not a small thing. The history of royals who were thrust into positions of significance before they were fully prepared for them is not uniformly encouraging. There are real risks to moving too fast, and the consequences of stumbling at this level are not personal. They are institutional. One badly handled situation, one misstep in front of the wrong camera at the wrong moment, and the narrative shifts from promising young royal to cautionary tale. That pressure is real, and Louise will feel every ounce of it. How will this land with the palace old guard? The courtiers, the senior advisors, the people who have spent their careers managing the institution according to established hierarchies, they do not always respond well to disruption, even when that disruption is clearly the right move. The question is not whether they will publicly object. They won't. The question is whether they will quietly undermine, subtly obstruct, do what palace insiders have done through generations. Wait for the new thing to stumble, and be ready to say they told you so. And what does this mean for the long-term structure of the monarchy? Because if Louise takes on this role and succeeds, if she proves herself in the way that Anne proved herself over decades of unglamorous essential work, then the implications for the institution are profound. It means the monarchy has found a model for distributing constitutional responsibility that does not depend on proximity to the throne. It means the institution is capable of identifying and developing talent within its own family structure in a way that actually serves the national interest. That would be genuinely new and genuinely important. Outro. So here is where we land. King Charles has just made a decision that almost nobody predicted, and that has left the royal family, and much of the political establishment, trying to process what it actually means. He has taken a young woman who has spent her entire life quietly preparing for something, even if she did not know exactly what that something would be. And he has placed her at the center of the institution's governance at one of the most uncertain moments in its modern history. He has bypassed his wife. He has bypassed the obvious heir. He has looked at the human beings around him and asked the most important question a leader can ask. Who do I actually trust? And the answer he arrived at, Anne, Edward, and now Louise, tells you everything you need to know about where his values lie and what he believes the monarchy needs to survive. Is this the right call? The honest answer is, we don't know yet. We won't know for years. What we know right now is that it is a bold call, a surprising call. A call that reveals a king who is thinking not just about getting through today, but about what the institution will look like after he is gone. And the fact that he is making it now, while he still has the strength and clarity to see it through, suggests a man who understands that the window for shaping his legacy will not stay open forever. The question now is whether Lady Louise Windsor is ready to carry what has just been placed in her hands. Given everything we know about her, everything her parents have built, everything her grandmother quietly prepared the ground for, there is reason to believe she just might be. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Do you think Louise is the right choice? Is this fair to Camilla? And is Charles making a masterstroke here or taking a risk that could backfire? Let's talk about it, because this story is just beginning. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because we are going to be watching every move this family makes, and you do not want to miss what comes next.